Welcome to Module 1, Lesson 13, From Ratio Tables to Equations Using the Value of a Ratio. So after today's lesson, I would like you to be able to restate a ratio in terms of its value, and I'd like you to be able to use that value of the ratio to problem solve by writing and solving equations. Okay, so we're going to take the values and we're going to turn them into equations. All right, so for the first exercise, we're looking at George, who is mixing a special shade of orange paint. He mixes 1 gallon of red paint to every 3 gallons of yellow paint. Okay, so I have these squares up here that are representing my yellow and my red. All right, so in 3/4 of a gallon, I want to know if 3/4 of a 4-gallon mix would be yellow paint. Okay, so what that means is, so let's say that in 1 gallon, I know that it has to be 3 parts yellow and 1 part red. Okay, so this gallon right here would be 3 parts yellow and 1 part red. Okay, so all of this makes up 1 gallon. Well, if this makes up 1 gallon and we want to remain consistent in our mixture, then the next gallon should also be 3 to 1, 3 to 1, and 3 to 1. So if we look at our mixture as a whole, we have 4 total pieces and 3 of them are yellow. So of our mixture, it would be true to say that 3/4 of that mixture, of that 4-gallon mix, would be yellow because it's 3 parts yellow to 4 parts total. Okay, we're not including the 1 part red because we're not talking about red. We're talking about 3 parts of yellow to the 4 total. All right, so the next question asks us, if every 1 gallon of yellow paint requires 1/3 of a gallon of red paint. Okay, so let's say here's my 1 gallon of yellow. If I use 1 gallon of yellow, I can't use a full gallon of red. That doesn't stick with the right mixture. Right, so I know that in order to use this gallon, this red, I have to split it up evenly amongst my yellows. Since there are 3 yellows, I have to split it up evenly amongst those 3 yellows. So let's pull those yellows down here. Okay, so to do that, I want to split, I have to give 1 to this one, 1 to this one, and 1 to this one. And I want to do it evenly. So I have to split the gallon into thirds. Right, so to show this, now I have split my gallon into thirds. So with this gallon of yellow goes 1/3, and 1/3, and 1/3, because each piece here is 1/3 of the gallon of red paint. Because together they make a whole gallon. Separately, they're each 1/3 because we split the 1 gallon into 3 parts. So yes, it is true that every 1 gallon of yellow paint requires 1/3 gallon of red paint. Okay, and again, drawing these pictures in your notes might help you out in the long run. So if you want to come back and draw them later, or if you want to pause and make sure to get the drawings in there, that'd be a good idea. All right, so every 1 gallon of red paint requires 3 gallons of yellow paint. Well, we can tell that just from the ratio. If I use 1 gallon of red, it tells me right in the problem that I have to use 3 gallons of yellow. So that's true. Now we want to know there is 1 gallon of red paint in a 4-gallon mix of orange paint. Okay, so to have a 4-gallon mix of orange paint, that means once I get orange paint, that orange paint is my total. Because once I mix my yellow and my red, it creates orange. So once I mix my yellow and my red, okay, so if I put in my yellow, so I put in 3 yellows. Right now I have 3 gallons of yellow paint. Once I mix in my 1 gallon of red paint, I now have 4 total gallons, and since I mix them all together, these 4 total gallons create a 4-gallon orange mixture. Okay, so each of these gallons together equals 4. Once I mix them together, I get orange. So it is true that there is 1 gallon of red paint. Here's my 1 gallon of red paint in my 4-gallon mixture of orange paint. There are 2 gallons of yellow paint in an 8-gallon mix of orange paint. Well, let's map it out. If I have an 8-gallon mix of orange paint, that means I've mixed the mixture twice. So I have 1, 2, 3 yellow, and 1 red. There's a 4-gallon mixture of orange paint. And then I have again 1, 2, 3 yellow, and I have to add another red. Now I have 8 gallons. I have 4 gallons of orange paint here and 4 gallons of orange paint here. Now the question is, okay, so now this is made orange and this is made orange. And I'm still showing the mix up top. Did I only use 2 gallons of yellow paint? Well, I automatically know that's not true because in one mixture of orange paint, I have to use 3 gallons of yellow paint. So if I make a double mixture of orange paint, I definitely can't only use 2 gallons of yellow paint. So I know that this is false. All right, so moving along, let's look at exercise 2. In exercise 2, we are looking at George's mixture again. And I know, like we said, that for every 1 gallon of red paint that he uses 3 gallons of yellow paint. I know that to go from 1 to 3, I took 1 and I multiplied by 3. So if he uses 2 gallons of red paint, okay, and we know that if I add 1 here, I have to add another 3 here. So I know it should be 6. The relationship here is that to get my 6 gallons of yellow, I had to take my 2 gallons of red and multiply it by 3. So I want you to take a minute and I want you to fill out the missing pieces in the table, and when you come back, we'll check your answer. Alright, so I'm going up by 1 each time. So here I would have 3 gallons of red paint and 4 gallons of red paint. And I know that my 3 gallons of red paint times 3 equals 9. Because I know for every 1 gallon of red paint I use, I have to use 3 gallons of yellow. So if I have 3 gallons of red, for every gallon of red that I use, I have to use 3 gallons of yellow. So 3 times 3 gives me 9. Okay, and here be 4. So my 12 gallons of yellow comes from taking the 4 gallons of red and multiplying it by 3. And then here I found that it's 15 gallons of yellow because I took my 5 gallons of red and multiplied it by 3. Because the amount of yellow is 3 times the amount of red. Okay, so looking here, how is the amount of yellow paint related to the amount of red paint? Well, we already said that the yellow, so we have to take the red paint and multiply it by 3 because the yellow is 3 times the amount of red. So let's look at what's the value of the ratio of yellow paint to red paint. Well, the ratio of red paint to yellow paint is 3 to 1. So I know that the value of that is 3 because 3 over 1 as a fraction means 3. So if you look at this, you notice that the value of the yellow, the value of the ratio of red to yellow is also the amount that we multiplied by to get the yellow. So we're looking to see, can we use this information to create an equation to find the amount of yellow paint, and what would it be? Well, since we know that the yellow is 3 times the amount of red, I know that if I take my red, let's use R for red, and I multiply it by 3, that should give me my amount of yellow. Alright, so let's look at it from a different point of view. Let's now talk about looking at the red paint related to the yellow paint. So we know that if we take the amount of yellow, so now I'm going backwards. We know if we take the amount of yellow, we can divide it by 3 and get our red. But we want to talk about everything in terms of multiplication, because multiplication is always a lot easier than division. Okay, so what I can do is I can look at my value. So the ratio of red paint to yellow paint is 1 to 3. And actually I'm going to write it like this. And I should have done that over here too, just so we know that it was written as a ratio. Okay, so then now the value of that ratio we know is 1/3. Well, before what we did is we took our red, so to find our yellow, we took the other color, we took red, and we multiplied it by our value. Well, now, but it was the value of yellow paint to red paint. Okay, so when you're trying to find which number to use or which value to use, you have to make sure to look at which ratio value you want to use. In this case, we're trying to find red, so the amount of red would be equal to the amount of yellow we used times the value 1/3. Okay, and we can also use our statements, so we know that red, so we said red is 3 times the amount of yellow because we have 3 as our value. Okay, and then we said that to turn that into a multiplication problem, we took red and made it into a variable, 3 times, and that gives us our yellow. You know what? I said that backwards. Yellow is 3 times our amount of red. I apologize. You can tell I've got a little bit of a cold going here, so get a little mixed up from time to time. Okay, so we know that our yellow is, we'll just try that again. Our yellow is 3 times the amount of red. So now if we go over here, we'll try this again. Should be able to get this one correct. Our red is 1/3 the amount of yellow. Okay, so I know that when I plug it into my equation, red is our equals. 1/3 is what I multiply by, that was my value. And then I put in y for yellow. Alright, so now we're going to take it a step further. George now plans to mix red paint and blue paint to create purple paint. Remember, the purple paint ends up being our total amount of paint. The color of purple he has decided to make combines red paint and blue paint in the ratio of 4:1. So again, let's highlight our important information here. So we know that it's red paint is 4 and blue paint is 1. If George can only purchase paint in 1-gallon containers, so he can't buy partial containers, he has to buy a whole gallon, we want to construct a ratio table for all possible combinations for red and blue paint that will give George no more than 25 gallons of purple paint. Okay, so now we actually have to pay attention to our gallons. So let's start off by creating our table. We know that if we use 1 blue, we have to use 4 red. Okay, and I know that to get my 4, I have to take my amount of blue times 4. If I use 2 blue, I know I have to use 8 red. And I know that that 8 comes from taking those 2 blue and multiplying it by 4, because the amount of red is 4 times the amount of blue. Okay, and again, I have 3 and 12. 4 and 16. And then 5 and 20. Okay, and I want you to pay attention to these relationships because they've been kind of working their way back into our equations. So now I've figured out my tables. So now what I want to do is I want to take a look at my equations for getting my amount of red paint and my amount of blue paint. Okay, so what I found, I'm gonna refill these in here. 16 and 20. Okay, so now I know that to find the amount of blue paint and to find the amount of red paint, I can create equations. I can also find an equation to find my total. So let's take a look here. I know that to find my red paint is 4 times my amount of blue paint. So I was able to take the blue paint times 4, and that gave me my red paint. Now, my ratio of blue to red is 1:4. So the value is 1/4. Okay, and it's always the one that you're trying to find. So I'm trying to find the amount of blue paint. So I take my ratio of blue to red. When I tried to find my value of red, when I was trying to find my red paint, I took the value of red to blue. So blue is 1/4 the amount of red. So if I want to find my blue, I take my red times the value. Okay, so 1/4, and that will give me my blue. So now I want to look at the total amount of paint, or I can also say my purple paint. In this case, I have 1 gallon of blue and 1 gallon of red, so that's 5 total gallons. 2 of blue and 8 of red gives me 10 total gallons. 3 and 12 gives me 15. 4 and 16 gives me 20. And 5 and 20 gives me 25. So I want to know, what is the value of the total paint to blue paint? So if I look at my total paint, I get 5 to 1 because it's total paint to blue paint. My ratio is 5 to 1. So my value is 5 over 1, which we can say is 5. So I know that my total paint is 5 times the amount of blue paint. Let's see if that works for everything else. Is 10 5 times the amount of 2? Is 15 5 times the amount of 3? Is 20 5 times the amount of 4? And is 25 5 times the amount of 5? In all of this, that is the case. So I know that if I want to find the total number of gallons, or my purple, I can take my blue paint times 5 and I get my total. Okay, so now I want to know, how is my ratio related to the equation? Okay, how is the value of the ratio related to the equation? Well, every time I found a value, I used that. Actually, let's say I multiplied that to what I knew to find what was missing. Okay, so in this case, I wanted to know the total, so I took what I knew, I took my blue, and I took the value of that, so I took the value of my total to my blue, and I used that value to multiply it to find my total. Okay, so how this helps us, so what I can do is I know that if I use 100 gallons of blue, I can figure out both how much red I need to use and the total amount of paint I need to use without creating a table, because I was able to create this equation. So since I know I used 100 gallons of red or blue, I can take that 100, multiply it by 4, and I know that that means I have to use 400 gallons of red. I can also find out my total because I can take that blue, multiply it by 5, and I know that then I will have 500 total gallons of paint. Right. So what I want you to do on your own is I want you to do B, C, and D from exercise 3 on your own. Again, I know it's confusing, but I still want you to try. Try it, and when you come back to class, we'll go over your answers. Remember, try, have answers, so that way we have somewhere to start from. Remember, when you're looking for your values, think of it's what I want to know over what I already know. So what's missing over what I have. Okay? As always, if you have questions, make sure to write them down so you can ask them when you come back to class.